We are live.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. We're going to be working this morning on hearing the report of the Building Energy Code Working Group. I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2. Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Garrett Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Civilian, Wyndham 2.
And in the room,
Andrew Brewer with Downs, Racklin and Martin, representing today the Builders and Remodelers Association and separately the American Institute of Architects Vermont chapter.
great. All right. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Alrighty. And for the record, I'm Representative Scott Campbell, Vice Chair of this committee and Chair of the Building Energy Code Working Group this year. In some cases I'm cited as co-chair, but the other co-chair, I guess, was Senator Seth Bongartz, and he really was just a participant, didn't have much to do with sort of lining up testimony and all that. So, and this is something I've been working on for years. Seth is sort of a newcomer for the issue. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Building Energy Code Working Group report that was submitted on November 15th. This is the second year of this group. I'll give you a little background. Get rid of this thing here. Okay. This is the second year of this working group. It was included in a bill. Let's see, Act 151 of 2024, and it's actually the third year of our legislative off-session working group or study committee working on this issue. And the fourth year of me being involved in something like this. My first summer in 2019, I organized a sort of volunteer committee that actually had almost all of the same people involved, stakeholders and architects and administration officials and all of that. So been working on this for quite a long time, trying to find ways to increase compliance with energy codes, which we have had for many years. In the case of residential since 1997, and on the commercial side, 2007. And these codes are in fact enacted and are required, are mandatory. But there has never been any enforcement or penalty for not following them. On the commercial side, the codes are pretty much followed. Various studies have been done on compliance rates, and in the commercial world, typically architects and engineers, licensed professionals are involved, and they are at risk of losing their licenses if they don't follow codes and the law. On the residential side, we don't have licenses for contractors. We do have a registration process, a registry. But there's still no enforcement mechanism and no penalties. So as a result, the compliance rate on the residential side is much lower. There's been studies showing it's as low as half or even lower. But that may actually overstate the matter. The compliance is probably much less. If you ask a random contractor whether they follow the energy codes or are even aware of them, you might find that half of the people you ask don't even know that we have them because they don't have to follow them.
Rep Torrey.
Sure, you can ask questions right away.
Quick basic question, I always forget. When is it a duplex or bigger that becomes commercial?
Well, that's a complicated question or complicated answer to that question. All rentals fall under the jurisdiction of the Division of Fire Safety, which does regulate or enforce commercial building codes. And they have promulgated what they call a fire and building safety code that applies to all buildings, including residential, 3 units and up. But they have jurisdiction over all rentals, which includes duplexes and single family. So they will, or they have jurisdiction over those buildings and can go in and enforce code expectations. Typically, they would be things like smoke alarms, CO detectors, egress, things like that.
Okay.
But I don't think they do an awful lot. Unfortunately, the director of the Division of Fire Safety, Mike DeRocher, who's been terrific to work with, is away this week. He does all kinds of national stuff. He would say that I think he would agree with what I just said. Let's see.
So an ADU would fall, an ADU rented to
That's
a
it.
non-family member?
It's a good question.
That is a good question.
ADU is what?
Accessory dwelling units?
Yeah.
The thing we're trying to encourage people to do on their property.
It's a fancy word. Apartment.
A mother-in-law
Yeah,
apartment.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
if it's a mother-in-law apartment, if
I'll just put a little question.
Yeah. the mother-in-law apartment used to be an exemption to all that egress and all those other codes. There's the way I understood it, why they called it.
I have no idea.
But the in-law apartment, that you didn't have to meet the codes.
I'm gonna make it a I don't think anybody ever asked that.
But no, but those things that, I'm an old fella. I mean, so the mother-in-law apartment syndrome, it truly was when you moved in your in-laws.
Yeah.
And that was.
Yeah.
I'm beyond that state now.
That is an interesting question because we've, some of our recent housing reform bills, like the Homes Act and stuff, have taken big steps to make it easier to build ADUs. So, I think it's a strategy we're trying to focus on.
Some of my constituents are having some issues with compliance, and I think the enforcement might be inconsistent right now. Maybe
Yeah.
it's new.
Well, so a rental unit, as I said, does fall under the jurisdiction of the Division of Fire Safety
And always
Uh,
has.
and always has. So I don't know what they do with ADUs, if anything, but if somebody could complain if there was an issue, no water, for example, or something like that, then and perhaps they would, they would come in and do something about it. But that's a good question, and I'm going to follow up on that.
Thank you.
So not only do we have any enforcement of energy codes in the residential world, particularly single family and duplex, we have no residential building code. I may have mentioned that already, but that is a key structure or mechanism for creating an administrative mechanism to be able to enforce or administer even energy codes. So that's a big gap. One of the things that we were able to do in Act 22 and 2022 was create a residential contractor registry. And we worked in collaboration with the Office of Professional Regulation to do this. OPR's interest was consumer protection in the nature of fraud. Say a contractor accepts requests a deposit to do a project and then never shows up again. That's the kind of thing that you read about in the papers with all too frequently. And so that was their angle on it. But my interest in promoting the contractor registry was as a sort of avenue to bring training and education to the residential contractors in particular. And so the registry is mandatory. Every residential contractor is required who does a project, any project in a year in excess of $10,000 is required to register. Fortunately, there's very little enforcement of this either, which we have found just in the first couple of years of this being in place. So there are apparently lots of contractors who are not even doing that. But the point was to have a mandatory registry for the purpose of being able to contact contractors about, well, things like pandemics. What are the working or condition or working requirements in the case of the pandemic, or any sort of emergency issue, and also keep track of people who are practicing sort of under the table and not well, not really under the table, but defrauding people of deposits, and there's no sort of credential or standard of practice for these contractors through Office of Professional Regulation, but there is this. It's a financial fraud kind of impetus from them. With this mandatory registry is a voluntary certification program, so that contractors can obtain certifications on things like well, energy codes, high performance building, even safety issues in OSHA or VOSHA safety protocols. So that was the concept, and unfortunately, it hasn't really gotten filled out very well yet.
Well, Campbell,
Yes.
can you remind me? I ask you this every time we talk about the residential contractor
Mhm.
registry. If you're a contractor who does, I remember the $10,000 threshold.
Yeah.
If I do 3 $4,000 jobs,
Mhm.
so the cumulative total is 12,000, but each one of those jobs is below the 10, am I required to register?
No.
Okay.
Not according to
A single
Wait,
job,
single job.
any one single job
That's right.
that in and of itself is more than 10K is the threshold.
Yes.
Okay. And that got bumped up a lot, right? I feel like
Originally,
during all the original testimony, our desire was to have the threshold be lower.
yes. I think it started around 2000. It's talking about making 3,000, 3,500, and the governor vetoed the original bill that included this registry, and then said in his veto message that if the threshold was more like $10,000, he might go along with it. So this was a House bill that he vetoed, and so after the veto, I worked with Senator Bray on the Senate side, and got the bill basically incorporated into a housing bill with the threshold bumped up to $10,000. So governor signed that bill.
Do we have any idea what percentage of the universe that captures?
Well,
I mean, compliance is low, even among those who are supposed to register, but how many, you know what I mean? How many contractors are out there who never exceed that? Then we get into back of the trunk handyman.
yeah, and we don't know. That's one
Yeah.
of the problems. That's one of the purposes of the registry, is to find out, well, who's doing this work out there?
Mhm.
And so
There's a lot.
there are a lot of people out there with a pickup truck and a hammer, and they're just doing stuff.
There's a need, big need for that.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
there is.
Yeah.
Asking them to say to have liability insurance, pay their taxes, and so there are some requirements. They have to pay their taxes. They have to have liability insurance, and they're required to have written contracts, which actually is not a bad idea. I've worked with
There's a template, isn't there?
there's a template in the law as well that the OPR has, or the template required that OPR has provided. But a contractor I worked with 40 years ago used to say, got to write it down. The people get amnesia during the course of a job. So anyway, it's a good idea. So lastly, this idea of pro-compliance is part of the climate action plan, and it wasn't one of the 10 or 12 top priority items that they named in their short sort of synopsis, but I think they had 40 or 50 priority recommendations overall, and it was one of those. So let's see. This year the working group members were me, Senator Baumgartz, Kelly Launder from Public Service Department, who's the Energy Division Assistant Director, Mike DeRocher, I might mentioned. Members of, representative from Efficiency Vermont, Steve Spatz, also from Burlington Electric and Vermont Gas, the current president, rotating presidency at AIA Vermont, past president of BBRA, Jim Bradley, the executive director of Associated General Contractors, and Sarah beforehand, who also participated in these meetings, from Associated General Contractors, the executive director or designee of the big cities and towns, representative from the regional planning commissions, that was Chris Campany, the VHCB asset director, Craig Peltier, who has worked on these issues also for a dozen years, about 15 years or more. And the director of OPR, Jennifer Collin, or Colin, I think is how she pronounces it. And then Peter Tucker, who's the public policy director for the Realtors. A lot of these people are involved, as I say, last year and the year before, and even in the volunteer that are committed in 2019. So there was a compliance study. The Public Service Department does or contracts for compliance studies periodically. The last one was in 2023. There's one underway right now, actually. And this was the sort of takeaway on residential energy code, residential building energy standard compliance from the 2023 study compared to previous study looking at the 2015 RVs and what the compliance rate was then. So it's declining. It's as I say, likely lower than this because the study universe is typically weighted towards where a lot of buildings get built, which is Chipping County, where there are more contractors, more competition, and often contractors are actually building higher quality buildings. Question.
How do you measure compliance?
It's a good question. And this is one of the issues that's been brought up by public service. There are requirements about following either a prescriptive path, which says certain amount of insulation in the walls, certain air leakage rate, and appliance standard, things like that. There's also software that you can use to show that you're in compliance with it. It gives the building a certain what's called HERS rating, home energy rating system rating, and then just getting an actual HERS rater come out and do a blower door test on the building.
Oh, so you're actually doing some building testing. You're not just taking a survey to a contractor.
Well, in the compliance days, I think they do. Well, no, I'm not sure about that. I was going to say I think they do visit the building. I'm not sure if they visit all of the buildings.
Right. So sample size.
Probably as a sample, yeah. But one of the issues that the public service folks, Kelly has brought up is just failing to file a certificate could be evidence of not complying. But the building itself might be in compliance. So, that's. I think it's important probably to get a little bit more fine-grained about what compliance means. So the photo on the right is from last year's report, and it's a little hard to see. I tried to blow it up as much as possible. I didn't see on the screen there. But this is a building that was was built in 2002. This photo was taken, I think, in 2022, and you can kind of see that this is with the building with the siding removed. This is the sheathing that has all kinds of mold and actual rot and going on underneath the sheathing or underneath the siding from lack of control of moisture migration. And this is illustrative of the problems that you can run across. And many of the people participating in the working group have sort of anecdotal stories about building failures, from contractors insulating to what they think is the right standard, and applying doing air sealing, applying a poly vapor barrier on the inside, for example, or some sort of vapor barrier on the outside. Anyway, building a wall assembly or a roof assembly that they think is correct, but actually is trapping moisture and not allowing the assembly to dry out. So the balance that you're trying to achieve is minimizing the wetting potential of the whole building and the assemblies, wall assembly, roof assembly, and below grade assembly. Minimize the wetting potential, but maximize the drying potential. So there's actually things to know about that. What drives moisture migration, and what drives how much air sealing, where does the air sealing for air control area need to be? All these sort of technical details that we really need builders to understand. So that's the focus. For me, that's the focus of this whole process. Why do we care about compliance? Because we want builders to understand what the dynamics are that they're dealing with.
Yeah, so this is not particularly even about energy. This is about health and safety and finances, because that's an expensive project right there. Well, I ask because, like, maybe if we frame it in a broader context than energy code,
Yes.
we can up compliance or adoption, education, et cetera, et cetera.
But we don't have residential.
That's the need for a building code.
That's the only need for a building code and the energy code. Well, so I sort of got into this world when I was the weather position director in the 90s. And early on, I probably said this before, but early on in my experience there, I realized that, gee, we're getting paid to units, but our mission is saving energy, which is a great thing. But really what we're doing is addressing comfort issues, durability issues, moisture migration issues, health and safety issues. And if we do all those things right, we've also made the building a lot more efficient.
And if we had a building code, energy would just be a chapter in.
Yes.
And it would get updated with the whole code.
Yeah.
It seems like it's what a lot of people want.
Yes. It's what builders and architects want. It's what the builders and architects who are participating in this kind of working group want. I think it's safe to say most architects would be in favor of a residential building code and an enforcement mechanism for an energy code. I think a lot of builders would say they don't want any government oversight of any kind. And I mean, I was a builder for years, and I never got, well, actually I did get licensed in Massachusetts when I started their licensing in about 1982, because I happened to be working there at the time, and all you had to do was apply. It was sort of a legacy kind of system, but I'd never been in a place where in order to work, I had to be licensed. But it does impose a sort of bureaucratic requirements on contractors who feel like they do a good job, and most contractors do a good job, and they try to do a good job. They think they're doing a good job, but again, it's a matter of education and understanding what the dynamics are that they're working with. Because buildings are actually energy systems, and how do you understand what the dynamics are, how things interact? When you put in a Gen Air downdraft stove that sucks 400 CFM, how does that affect the fireplace? In a building that's pretty well air sealed. There was a story, I don't know if it was true or just apocryphal, of one of those downdraft fans sucking a fire from a fireplace across a rug. So it's possible for that to happen. Certainly, you can downdraft other combustion appliances like water heaters and furnaces and boilers. with enough depressurization in other parts of the house or parts of the building. So people need to understand what the dynamics are they're dealing with, both in terms of health and safety like that, and also in terms of moisture management like this photograph.
So I'm just need a little clarification. It seems like I remember last year in testimony, there was this international type building code, general building code.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And this is even exceeds that. Is that correct? And
We can
before
get into all kinds of nuance.
but
So-
my question is, if this building was built to that code, that international one, which is a lower threshold, I understand it's not super high on the efficiency thing, but it's still an efficient building. Would this have happened?
All right. Well, so just in general, there are what are called model codes. There's a group based in Rhode Island, I believe, that is called the International Code Council, and they publish a commercial code called the International Building Code (IBC), and a residential code they call the International Residential Code (IRC), and also an International Energy Conservation Code (IECC). The IECC is actually, as I understand it, incorporated in the next generation of the residential code. I'm not sure how it intersects with the commercial code, but if this building were built according to code, would this have happened? I hope not. It certainly shouldn't. But again, what's key is the builder understanding the dynamics that they're dealing with.
Right.
So I can't tell you what the details are in this building. In terms of was there a poly layer on the inside? Was there some sort of house wrap on the outside that was not sufficiently vapor permeable? I don't even know what the siding was, whether it was wood siding or vinyl siding. So I don't know exactly.
Looks like
The particulars. It looks like it's probably wood to me too. One thing that I've learned it is the strategy of spacing wood siding off of the sheathing is incredibly effective. I painted my house 20 years ago, and there's still no flaking of paint on the clapboards anywhere. There is some flaking on the and failing paint peeling and failure on the trim because there's solid wood behind the trim. But where there's an airspace behind the clapboards, and the clapboards are sealed on all sides. In fact, on and even the cut ends, this paint stays on forever. So it's just a matter. It's just it's just a matter of understanding managing the moisture flows, understanding what the dynamics are managing moisture flows. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if it's.
Well, I'm just concerned that what little I know contractors, I mean, they're all built in 6-inch walls and trying to build a fairly efficient house. How much more is this going to increase the cost?
Right.
Doing the residential energy code upgrades and we're trying to get people into affordable housing.
Right.
So.
Okay. So this is a good point. I probably will get into it later.
Yeah.
But yes, there is an additional upfront cost to building a higher quality, a higher performing building. The life cycle cost is lower though. So you have to decide how you're defining affordability. Is affordability just first cost, or is it also include the running costs or the ongoing cost of managing the building? You know, utilities and painting and all the other things that you need to do to maintain a building, right?
And if I may add,
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a false distinction, I think, with residences because they're all monthly charges, right? You got to pay your mortgage, your rent every month. You got to pay your heating bill every month.
Yeah.
So the upfront cost is essentially a monthly cost. You've got to,
Yeah,
whatever
well,
you got to pay a deposit for a rental or a down payment for a
Right.
purchase, theirs is an upfront cost, but most of the cost is monthly cost and it's monthly. So that's the real question.
yeah, well,
What
so
do you do
if,
to your monthly bills?
so if you can, if the upcharge for building a higher quality building is included in the mortgage and it's spread over 30 years, then it's almost always going to be a cash positive situation. Your utility costs will be lower than the additional mortgage cost. You guys are asking great questions. I don't want to get into too much detail, but cost effectiveness, which is how people determine whether this is a good idea to do, whatever the thing is a really slippery concept because it requires that you project out what the savings are going to be from adding insulation or doing more air sealing or whatever it might be. Projecting what the savings are requires that you know what the future fuel costs are going to be. And obviously we don't know that. They're just guessing. So that's it makes it difficult to, and also the lifespan of the measure is the other, guess, right? So when you're building a building, adding insulation, doing a better job air sealing, making a better building shell, that's the time to do that because that's the time when it's the least incremental cost increase. Going back and doing weatherization later is more expensive, and that's basically what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
We're going back and doing it here.
And the cost accounting doesn't include health and safety issues, which is impossible to quantify.
That's right.
Really.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't include that because cost effectiveness is typically calculated using customer economics. So it doesn't include social benefits or health and safety benefits.
Like the weatherization conversation from yesterday.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the health benefits are not impossible to quantify. You can measure a reduction in respiratory illness and visits to the ER and
Right.
missed days at work and all those things.
Well, those things are often used in calculating cost effectiveness from a program point of view, not from a customer economics point of view.
Yeah.
And so they're sort of valid or much easier to include in deciding what level of incentives to provide from a program for people to do more insulation or whatever. So that's another nuance. Customer economics is a really important way of doing an analysis, from the customer's perspective. But it's when you're trying to decide what incentives to provide to people to do better insulation or build co-compliant housing. It's valid to look at the societal benefits as well as actual cost benefits. All right, we're only on slide 3.
Do we know? We don't know what caused this. Whether there was a lack of a vapor barrier on the interior or a mistaken application of a vapor barrier on two sides. You mentioned about the Tyvek.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Building wrap. Yeah.
Building wrap. Sorry, use a trade name.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could see here. You see the vertical wall in between the two windows, which appears to be perhaps that was where a sidewall was framed in. So the lack of perhaps insulation being stuffed where those two corners match, and then around the window, both windows are bare. So improper
Flashing around the window.
maybe not flashing, but insulation between the bottom of the window and been a long time since I drew a building plan, whether they just didn't get insulation or whatever.
Yeah.
So you see the red board there, which
Right there.
right there.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's the area where the top plate and bottom plate of the next floor was in.
That almost looks like a foam board to me.
One board, right.
Yeah.
So somebody saved themselves a piece of
Yeah.
2x4 by slapping that in and not having to,
Or,
not 2x4, but 4x8.
yeah,
They
yeah,
8 feet down,
yeah,
8 feet up, they got a gap and they filled it for cheapy,
it's possible.
but we don't know.
We don't know.
just,
Yeah.
all we know is Savage came in for a mold problem.
We should probably
Yeah, let's
move on along.
keep on going. But yeah, I mean, you're right, and that's the point, is having contractors understand the moisture and energy and airflow dynamics of the structure is really critical. And for me, training is the whole goal. How do we get, and there are a lot of training opportunities. And what we have found, and Steve Spatz, who the guy from Efficiency Vermont, who was participated in the working group this year, is a trainer for VEIC, for Efficiency Vermont, and very knowledgeable, and conducts lots of trainings, and says one of the problems that they have with trainings is getting people to come. So how do we get people to come? If you require them to go, then that would be one way of doing it. I don't know if I mentioned that here later, but contractor, actually I was talking to Representative Sweeney, who's, as you probably know, is a building contractor, fairly good sized building contractor in somewhere in Chittenden County, Shelburne, I think. And he was talking to me the other day and he said, what we need is licenses for contractors, because then they would learn the codes, the rules, and follow them. And that is probably the shortest path to increasing code compliance. Because as I mentioned, in the commercial side, compliance is very high, but in the residential side, it's not. And one of the main differences is having licensed professionals involved on the commercial side and not on the residential side. Anyway, it's not likely. It's not. We're not going to get licenses for residential contractors in the current environment. So, and we recognize that going into this year's working group. So my thinking and what I wanted to get out of the working group was, how can we create more incentives for not necessarily monetary incentives, but incentives for contractors to comply voluntarily. So how do we increase voluntary compliance? So that's what we worked on this year.
Scott,
What came out.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. I just realized our agenda had not been updated, so I apologize. We have a witness at 10.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought we had until 11, so I had not seen the latest. So I apologize. I thought we had until 11 personally, so I was not moving things along here.
I thought we had until 11 too.
Yeah, I did. Too.
So I'm sorry.
Who do we have from you? Is it
We
Kelly?
have the PUC coming in at 10 o'clock to go over the Act 142 report,
Oh, gee.
which is important. So I'm really sorry.
Okay.
Apologies.
Yeah.
So we'll whatever we don't finish now,
Okay.
I think let's not rush through your presentation.
Okay.
Let's just go until 5 of 10.
Okay.
Whatever we don't get to, maybe we'll have time.
We have an hour this afternoon from 2 to 3 that we could slot in.
Okay, let's just see how it goes,
Okay.
because we do have Kelly coming in at 11.
Yeah. All
And
right.
Andrew, right?
You can bump me to any day.
Okay, so we
Yes.
just bumped Andrew, so maybe we can finish after Jake.
Okay.
Okay, so apologies for that, but don't rush, let's just, continue at our
I
pace.
would have gone a little quicker too if I had realized.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I didn't see the agenda either. All right, so the legislative directive that was in Act 151 from 2024 was these three things: recommend strategies and programs to increase awareness and compliance, develop plans and recommendations for potential transition to a comprehensive program for RDs and CDs at Division of Fire Safety, and consider whether or not the state should adopt a statewide building code. So those were the powers and duties and the directive to the working group, the 2-year working group.
So that's what you guys were told to work on this year.
That's what you're told to work on, well, the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So the major recommendations that came out of the working group were as has happened for all 3 years, actually all 4 years, if you include my voluntary group, that was that the Division of Fire Safety, which handles all the other building codes, really ought to be the so-called authority having jurisdiction for energy codes as well. And the group voted narrowly in favor of continuing that recommendation with a timeline of getting there by 2030. And the Division of Fire Safety, Public Service Department, and some others, Associated General Contractors, declined to support that recommendation because they feel there's just not enough time and not enough resources for a Division of Fire Safety to take this on. Division of Fire Safety, Mike DeRocher, although he will say that he recognizes that is the ultimate goal, just doesn't see a path for getting there now. They would need to hire people. They would need to staff up to be able to handle not only understanding energy codes, but also adding plan review for energy code purposes to their process that they do now. So I think that was the main reason. And everybody's worried about the additional cost of layering on another process into getting buildings built, housing built in particular. So the other major recommendations were to support code compliance work, not just above code, but code compliance work, with some funding from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which has accumulated some above projected revenues over the last 3 years.
Oh, no, we don't, I really don't want us to rush. We'll get where we get.
Okay.
We're not gonna finish
I
this.
hate to interrupt you because you're on a roll.
Yeah.
Is this the first time you guys thought about funding from Reggie?
Yes, I think so. And this was something that I had thought about along the way, because the major strategy that I was working on here, and I think other people too, was using the builder registry as sort of beefing up the builder registry as an avenue to increasing compliance. So the builder registry, as I mentioned, is OPR has not had the resources to really make it something that is useful to consumers and even to contractors. It's hard to find on their website, and when you do find it, there isn't an easy way to figure out what builders you're looking for. You can find them by name, but if you're looking, for example, for a builder to do a roof on your house, they don't have builders that you can filter by who does roofing, for example, or who does roofing in my area. So they need some funding in order to provide that kind of information, and also they don't really have the expertise in-house to sort of vet what certifications would be appropriate to ask to provide for builders as an option for builders to obtain voluntarily. What are germane to the kinds of issues that people are seeing, and then to figure out who the credentialing entities ought to be for those certifications. So there's a lot of technical stuff that we would like them to be able to do, but they don't have the resources to do. So it occurred to me that with that, a little bit of that money in Reggie, we could probably get an awful lot of this.
I had a question about the Reggie money too. I know that we had invited Efficiency Vermont to testify, and they basically said that their opinions are already included in the report.
Yeah.
But when Peter Walk came in to talk about their current DRP, I always forget what those initials stand for, but their current DRP process that's ongoing with the department, it sounds like they have other plans for the Reggie money, right? They've got it.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah. Well, so, and I actually, I should have shared this with all of you. I got an email yesterday from Peter, because I had asked him, you might remember. So how much is that sort of pot of Reggie money that we haven't used. How much is that, and what are your projections for the next 3 years? And he said that the pot is around 8 million, 8 point something million. And they're projecting, I think it was around, I'd have to look it up again. They're projecting a little bit. They want to keep a little pot, basically, in case revenues fall off. The projected revenues are as a result of auctions. Well, I won't get into that, but anyway, so they're a little hard to pin down at this point.
Okay.
The scale of money that I'm talking about for doing this is on the order of $400,000, which is not in this report, but in the bill that is going to come out of this report. I haven't got back yet.
Okay.
So another issue is a consumer-oriented website. Somebody to set that up and maintain it for at least a year or two, and then marketing to the public about the existence of a place to go to find out who you should get to do your work. And then the third major thing that the working group recommended was setting up a task force to really help OPR with the technical aspects of improving the contractor registry. Let's see. Other recommendations included using, Rich, you asked about the international codes and the model codes. One of the questions that people were talking about was, why don't we just use the model codes and not add Vermont specific issues, or add minimums of Vermont specific changes to those codes. That would make it easier to update the code, because the International Code Council does it. They do it already. It would make it easier for training and materials to make that available for contractors. So it would be less expensive. What that would exclude then are Vermont's energy goals, which are now now drive changes to the model codes.
Or, I mean, the code needs to adapt to climate, right? So do the international codes have a cold climate section that's?
I think they are.
Robust enough.
They do adapt to climate. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't tell you the mechanism, but I'm sure they do. Let's. The other recommendation. Oh, I see. To centralize the compliance certificates. Right now, compliance certificates are filed with the town records. And then they're also supposed to be sent to the Public Service Department. Compliance with this particular requirement is not that high. And again, there's no penalty if you don't follow it. And these compliance certificates are also self-certified. So the builder signs off on, yes, I complied. And
is the builder supposed to simultaneously submit to the town and the department, or is they supposed to submit to the town and then the town is supposed to send it along?
I believe it's the builder's responsibility or the filer's responsibility.
Okay. To send it to the two places.
That's it, like 2 places, yeah.
And didn't we got rid of a very similar requirement for the PUC last year?
We did.
Oh,
That's what brought it to mind.
that there was a
Yeah.
It was for
there was a double
the,
filing requirement.
Mhm.
Everybody
Because the
agreed.
authority not.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and Division of Fire Safety is in the process of updating their database. They're making a very comprehensive database for handling all of the projects, the commercial projects typically that they handle. And they're including in this update, in this database now, a place for compliance certificates for commercial building energy standards. They will also include them for residential building energy standards for buildings under their jurisdiction. They've been a little back and forth about whether they would be willing to accept residential certificates for single family or occupied buildings. They don't regulate single family or occupied now. They don't want to, but it would make sense to centralize the repository of compliance certificates in one place and not have them scattered in different places. So the recommendation from the group was that we should do that. Okay, time here. I'll just finish this slide and then take a pause. Another technical recommendation was to make this the energy module training, which is in statute and is required of the people in the building profession, people in the trades, and architects and engineers. There's an energy module that is supposed to train people on the existence of energy codes. But there was never any sort of description of what the energy module should include, except that it should make people aware of the existence of the codes and the statute. So what it turned out to be, in the case of what's available on the Division of Fire Safety's website, is just a 20-minute review of the statute, which of course is virtually meaningless to anybody, but those of us in this building, and maybe even to us. So it's not very helpful. So the recommendation was to make this training meaningful, and give people some idea of the relevance of the code to the work that they do. That was, and then the other suggestion or recommendation was adding ventilation testing. So there is a ventilation requirement in the code. Currently, well, the 2024 version of RVs includes a whole house ventilation system as that's one of the expensive things that it does include. But you're supposed to have fresh air to breathe, and we all know that it's like being in a stuffy room. So there is a ventilation requirement. There's not a ventilation testing requirement. So there's not what's called a commissioning requirement in the code right now. In other words, you can put in a system, but who's testing to make sure that it works the way it's supposed to? I mean, the airflow is what it is supposed to be. So that was the other technical recommendation. So I can leave it there. We'll come back to.
Yep, that's a good breaking point. So Joe was going to update the agenda, but just so everybody here knows, Jake is here, and we're really appreciative. We're very appreciative of that. This is an important study, a report that we're about to be hearing about. And I don't want to rush that. So we have moved the rest of the building energy code working group testimony to 2:00 this afternoon. Okay, Joe will get all this updated online. But what the plan is right now is we're going to take a 5-minute break so everybody can, go to the bathroom or whatever. Then we will come back with the PUC, and we will just leave that open until lunch. Not try to. I think folks might have a lot of questions. It's a beefy study report. Sorry. And then this afternoon we'll have Lisa come in at 1 to talk about IT investments, and that could also be a longer conversation, but she could come back anytime. So we'll get the rest of our building working group stuff in at 2, and then if we have floor, and then we're done for the day. And Joe's going to get all that online, or it may already be, and we can go off live, and let's try to come back in 4 minutes.
We are also,
We cleared out the morning until lunch, to make plenty of time for this, report, this study, because, it's an important one, and two, it's something we all care about, and three, it could be the basis for, drafting requests that are already in, current drafting requests, a committee bill. So I want to make sure we allow time for questions. And if we wrap up early, we wrap up early, but I just wanted to let everybody know, ask your questions. This is our big chance, to talk about this important piece of work. So, welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. We are here with PUC to talk about their energy cost stabilization study. I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 district.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Richard Bailey, Memorial 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleffner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Spillian, Wyndham 2.
Great. All right. For the record.
And my name is Jake Marin. I'm an attorney for the Vermont Public Utility Commission.
I'm Jacob Davis. I'm a utilities analyst for the Vermont Public Utility Commission.
Great. And I'm hopefully getting ready to share my screen here. It's up. Okay, great. And that's reading. Okay, we've introduced ourselves. I'll let you get a quick look at the overview of where we're headed, and we'll get right into it. So thank you very much for having us. I'll start with just a quick overview of what Act 142 asked the Commission to report on, and that hopefully will sort of level set the rest of this conversation. The overall arching question is whether the Commission should recommend the creation of a statewide program to reduce energy burden in Vermont. And when looking at that question, there were sort of two buckets, I'll call them, of statewide programs that we were asked to consider. So-called direct energy assistance, so helping people with their bills, either through discounted electric rates or fuel assistance or things like that. And then also programs that reduce energy burden by making investments in weatherization and efficiency. So those were the sort of two sort of broad categories of programs that we were looking at. Act 142 required engagement with a broad array of stakeholders, including government agencies, those community action agencies that provide a lot of these services, also the customers who actually use these programs, and the utilities and the efficiency utilities who provide a lot of these programs. The Commission was supposed to look at both programs inside Vermont and outside Vermont. So we did a survey of programs that are already being offered in Vermont. And then we also looked at what some of the other states were doing, both for direct assistance programs and weatherization and efficiency programs. And then the Commission was also supposed to consider recommendations on how to coordinate existing programs and identify any obstacles or solutions for increasing coordination across existing programs and sectors, and make a recommendation about whether any programs needed to be better aligned or even discontinued if we created a statewide program, and identify a funding mechanism for a statewide program if it was recommended. And obviously we submitted this report earlier in December. We conducted a very significant amount of process to draft this report. We had 3 workshops, one of which was specifically dedicated to hearing from customers who are income qualified to use these programs. We also, invited all of the electric and gas distribution utilities, the efficiency utilities, and government agencies to attend these workshops and to give input. Those workshops were accompanied by 3 rounds of written comments, so opportunity for folks to make their thoughts and feelings available to us in written form. We also conducted 5 interviews with the community action agencies to get a better understanding of their operations and the very important services they provide. We also conducted an online survey for customers who are income qualified for these programs, and we received dozens of public comments through EPUC and through email. So energy burden is defined as the percentage of income a household expends on energy-related expenditures, including electric, thermal, and transportation costs. So basically, you're totaling up all of your energy bills, including your fuel bills, your gasoline bills, your electric bills, and then, dividing that by your household income, and you get a percentage. And it's 11% is generally considered, if someone is spending more than 11% of their income, that they're considered energy burdened.
And that is in this act, it added transportation, which is unconventional in terms of energy burden. Usually people just mean the thermal and electric side. And so on the thermal electric side, I think people target 6%, something like that. It's with the transportation added in, that's that kind of 11% figure.
And Representative.
Yeah. With energy burden in terms of income, is it strictly income earned from work?
It's using the definition of income that's used for AMI, so I assume that's all income, but I'd have to go back and look exactly at the definition.
Yeah, I think you can look at it either way, where of course our measurements are only as good as what we can gather. And so probably most people's income is income derived from work that will be on a tax return or something, but some people's might be
reported or.
Yeah. And for those people, it would be like, we might not know the real amount, but they know the real energy burden that they face.
Just interesting to me, in our region, we have higher than average levels of poverty and higher than average levels of wealth, including folks wealthy way. And so I'm always interested in this question of how we're establishing.
And to talk about that, wealth is just not considered whatsoever. So it's just income. It's just the flow variable, not the stock variable of what people are capable of paying.
Absolutely. The thing on income, if we're talking about AMI, we're talking about household income too,
Yes,
not individual.
correct.
That's exactly right. But
And there's a lot of detail on this subject in a report that was drafted by Efficiency Vermont. There's a link to it on, I believe, page 5 or 6 of the report. So and that has really interesting data about sort of the geography of energy burden, because obviously where you live can influence this. If you have which utility you're served by, it affects, your costs. Whether you have access to natural gas, whether you live close to areas where there are jobs or not close to area where there are jobs, can all influence the relative size of the pie. This pie is an average for the whole state. So each individual's experience obviously is going to vary quite a bit. And but on average, Vermonters, most of the energy expenses come from the transportation and heating sector. The electric sector is smaller. However, depending on how successful the state is as in encouraging electrification of the heating and transportation sectors, this pie shapes could change over time, obviously.
And I have a question about that pie chart. Just a really basic question. Are you saying that of the average household energy burden?
yes, it totals to 100% of the energy burden.
Okay, so I'm looking at, so if my energy burden is 11%, it's 20 of that 11%, it's 20% electric, my electric bill, 35% my heating bill, and 45% my transportation bill.
Yeah, so if I can simplify that a little bit, if we just hypothetically said it was 10% was your energy burden,
Okay,
then 4.5%
Okay.
of your income is spent on transportation, 20% or 2% of your income is spent on electricity, so forth.
And sorry, your hand is up first.
And another question, and I apologize, I have not gone into the Vermont burden report recently, but is there any distinction that is made in terms of, there is, you said geographically, so is that by utility? Because we have some utilities that have much higher rates, like REC, for instance, than other.
So I believe they did it on a town by town basis. And so the utility service territories aren't drawn on that map, as I recall. But if you know in your head what areas of the state are served by certain utilities, you might see that pattern. But because electricity rates are a smaller segment, it may not come out. I don't think you're going to see like sort of the different shades of colors neatly outlining the utility service territory.
Yeah, to add to that a little bit. This is just a blanket average of all of Vermont, attempting to account for all Vermont households, regardless of where they're located. In Efficiency Vermont's report, they use census data, housing data to construct some different cuts that are maybe not directly in the report. It's like you click a link, it takes you to a table kind of thing. And so I poked around in that a little bit, and so the story changes a little bit, as you're pointing out, based on geography, because as Jake said, we would expect where you're located, how close you are to your job, if transportation is such a big portion, that to have a huge impact, things of that nature. So it's possible to drill down further, but this really is just an average of the state.
When we did our update to the res, one of the things that was really important to me, at least, was to recognize that we had so many different types of utilities in different places, operating in different ways. Which makes, policy, a uniform policy challenging sometimes.
And presumably, it also varies depending on what altitude you live at, whether you're in a cold hollow, things like that.
And the age of your home and all of those things.
And I also would like to make explicit, in order to check something that's applied, what you said earlier, which is that heating component is non-electric heating and transpose non-electric transpo.
To the best of our ability, I think Efficiency Vermont did make those cuts. I don't remember for sure. I'd have to check back. But to the best of our ability, we did that, but it's not really possible, as you're probably pointing out, to fully separate that with electric vehicles and with more cold climate heat pumps and whatnot.
It's easy in my house. It's all purple.
It is easy. Derek, Victoria.
And follow up to that, I'm curious just for the future, in terms of data, having EV rates, maybe having a heat pump rate, seasonal heat pump rate, would we end up with more granularity then in order to say, to have more insight into the other categories as electrification proceeds? Or is that data always going to be not available to the planners? And
I'll say, so partly like we don't, know what the future will hold, but in terms of the EV rates that already exist, people have to opt into those. So it may be in people's best interest rate wise to opt into that, but if they don't, then we don't know. It's just electricity being used, not specific to that usage.
Yeah, it also really depends on the tariff structure that the utilities use. If you have a separate meter for your EV, then it's really easy to get that data out. But if you just have a heating rate that encourages heating during off-peak times, but it's metering the whole house still, you're not going to be able to tease out what's heating and what's other electric consumption.
But we are able to get aggregated data from utilities to some extent.
The utilities, they give us we know all the load that they have, but you don't necessarily know what the load is being used for, whether it was used to charge a car or heat a house or run a toaster. The smart meters, they give us a lot of cool information, but they don't necessarily give you that.
And there are some.
It seems like we would need it.
Well, and it seems like like my car charger's all linked up with GMP.
Mm-hmm.
So they're knowing, aren't they?
They are. I think the question is, how is all of that data? GMP is one utility,
right.
Not every utility has the same setup, and
right.
I just don't know. They sounds like they're metering yours separate. So like I said, if they're metering a load separately, then yes, you will know. But if they're not, then I don't think you would be able to pull it out. But this is something that I would definitely recommend talking to either Josh Castengay or someone at GMP about what data is actually accessible.
And while acknowledging that they're not the only utility either.
Right.
So
not every utility has an entire smart meter rollout yet.
Right.
So
getting there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and even with smart meters, there can be kind of telematics timing issues that make it harder to see what's really going on. So it's when there's not a great cellular internet signal, things like that. So, we always want to know more, but there is some limit to the measurement as of now.
Okay.
Right, so I'll start with the recommendations first, and then we'll get into the details of of sort of the existing programs and those other things that we looked at. But basically, the commission's overall conclusion is that there are several tested statewide programs that we have going on right now that are very successful at addressing energy burden. The issue is that the demand for services outstrips the funding, and so more funding from stable sources needed to run those programs to help Vermonters with their energy burden. And so instead of recommending a new statewide program, the commission is recommending a funding source to fund what we've already set out to do, but to do more of it. Specifically, the Low Income Weatherization Assistance Program, or the WAPS that we call them. They have extensive experience, fixing people's homes so that they can be weatherized and be more efficient and save money in the long run. However, it's been acknowledged that it just costs more to weatherize a lot of these homes. They tend to be older. They need significant work or even vermiculite remediation. The costs can be very high. So the commission is recommending an increase to the tax on heating oil, propane and kerosene, and other dyed diesels, so that there is a steady income stream to fund that increased weatherization program. The commission also,
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's currently 2 cents a gallon.
I believe it is.
Yes.
I'd have to look at the statute
Yeah,
again.
sure.
Yeah.
It is 2 cents.
These
Two.
it's not straight.
No. It's also a sort of outline of electric, or not electric, PGS. But it gets complicated, but basically 2 cents a gallon.
Quick question. I don't know if you know the answer, but how does that tax compare to other states in New England? Are we on the high side of fuel taxes or low side?
That's a good question. I don't know the
Yeah,
answer.
Vermont was the first to have a state weatherization fund. It augments the U.S. Department of Energy's weatherization fund. And I think some other states have set them up. I don't know how they fund them. But Vermont's has always been funded through a fuel tax since 1990.
And when you say, we voted to increase that tax, from 2 cents to 4 cents in 2019, but it died in the Senate. Is that the last time we voted on it?
It died in the House, actually. It didn't survive the floor. It was amended, yeah.
Anyway, and the fund should also be made available for weatherization readiness repairs. Is that the pre-weatherization, health and safety,
Yes,
vermiculite, asbestos,
exactly.
leaky roofs?
Yeah, roof. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. In talking with the community action agencies and the WEPs, these were the situations they encountered that they identified as things that made it challenging to provide assistance, and where there's an acute need for more funding to do these things. Our second recommendation, comes in this context of great uncertainty about the availability of federal funding. The Low-Income Heating Assistance Program is a critical direct assistance program for energy burden that we have in Vermont. And, we recommend that the legislature consider allocating general fund dollars to support that. That is a sort of a direct anti-poverty type of measure that can really address energy burden in a real way. And I think it complements the first recommendation is, one is addressing the acute need now, and the other is a long-term investment to help people lower their bills, over a longer term. Obviously, the fuel tax can be regressive because everyone pays it regardless of their income. So the commission recommends that the legislature investigate some sort of way to try to offset that for low income Vermonters, either through a tax credit, or if there is some way to create an upfront rebate, when people purchase their oil, and if they can demonstrate that they're qualified through DCF or something like that, then they wouldn't have to pay this extra 2 cent tax or whatever it is that we recommended. That would be a good thing to hold them harmless from this new funding source.
As part of the policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we showed on the previous slide, transportation is a major driver of energy burden, and the state had a pretty comprehensive suite of incentives for high efficiency vehicles. However, our understanding is that those funds have been depleted at this point, and so if the state wants to continue sort of making progress on addressing energy burden and on the transportation side, there's going to need to be some sort of support to encourage people to get highly efficient vehicles, whether they're plug-in hybrids or all electric. Anything that reduces people's gasoline consumption is going to help with that portion of the pie. And then, one of the topics that we'll discuss a little bit more later, was whether there should be a discounted rate for all customers of the state, regardless of what electric utility they're in. The commission ended up not recommending the creation of such a program. However, if the legislature is looking for a way to provide bill credits to low-income customers on their electric bill, all of our utilities have affordable community renewable energy programs now, or ACRE programs, and expanding those programs would provide a direct benefit to income qualified customers. It would also support our state's renewable energy goals, but it would not necessarily have some of the issues that we identified with doing a discounted rate for all utilities.
Is ACRE some of the stuff we took testimony on last year? Is that the offsite community solar?
It is. So the utility builds a 5 megawatt or so sized solar array, and then allows customers to sort of participate in that plant and receive credits based on the generation of that credit.
So the utilities meeting their tier 3,
tier 2,
yeah, and low income. We're putting more solar online. The utilities helping to meet their tier 2 obligations under the RES, and low income
are getting a credit.
Are getting a credit. Yeah, we learned about that last year. Sorry, Dara.
Just one thing to flag for you, Chair, is that while we're going to be seeing our utilities very soon, we might want to inquire about their programs for an update.
Let's do, because it actually was, I didn't remember that. Did you say every utility is already participating in this?
I believe that.
That's right.
The municipals, I believe, have a
shared thing,
coordinated effort, but I'll double check that and get back. But
okay, and we have them all coming in. It's just remembering as a group to ask them about their ACRE programs. They're all coming in over the next couple of weeks. Yeah,
just a quick question for you as well. Do we have utility goals for the tier 2 and tier 3 around low income? What percentage of those incentives go to low income? Are they defined?
No, I don't believe there's not a statutory requirement.
No statutory.
Yeah. And so tier 2 requires the utilities to purchase a certain amount of their load from distributed renewable energy facilities located in Vermont. It doesn't have a low income component.
And that's true for tier 3 as well.
Tier 3 might be different. I
have to look it up.
Yeah, I'd have to look at. That is not my bailiwick, so I'll fortunately have to pass on that question.
Regarding not making a recommendation on
a discounted rate for low income. Yeah.
Is there a rationale for it?
Yes. So backing up, I'll just make sure everyone understands what we're talking about. Some of our utilities, particularly GMP and BED, offer a discounted rate to income qualified customers. And the way they do that is they put a charge on every customer's bill, like $2. They collect all that money and then they use it to buy down the rates for income qualified customers. The commission looked at whether it made sense to require every utility to do that, or whether it made sense to create some sort of pooled structure where all the utilities do that. a couple things that came out of that investigation were, one, even in the utilities where they offer this discounted rate, only about up to 45% of income qualified customers take advantage of it, which means that a significant number of income qualified customers are just paying the extra $2 on their bill and not getting the discount. So while the commission has approved these programs, and I don't want to say it's not that the commission disfavors them. We didn't feel that it was appropriate to recommend them for everyone. The commission can approve one of these if a utility wants to volunteer to do one and design one. The commission can review and approve it, but in terms of forcing the utilities to do it, the commission didn't feel like that was an appropriate step. For the small utilities, if they go it alone, it can be an administrative burden, and also the amount of money that they would need to raise from their higher income customers would constitute a more significant cost shift than $2. But because some of these utilities are very small, but have a higher percentage of low income customers in their service territories. Also, just the administrative process of doing that, it might be a little bit much for some of our smallest municipal utilities to take on individually. So that raised the question of whether it made sense to create sort of a statewide program. And one of the issues with that is just a sort of nuts and bolts issue. There would need to be a fiscal agent, someone who collects all the money on behalf of all the utilities and then redisperses it to all of the utilities. And there would have to be an annual rate setting proceeding. That seemed like a bit of a heavy lift. Again, considering that, one, this was going to be a benefit that wasn't necessarily going to be adopted by all low-income customers. And two, we're now talking about a relatively small portion of the state's utilities, at least in terms of number of customers, that don't have these programs. It's our two cooperatives and most of our municipals. And so, again, it was sort of a balance of, again, it's not that the commission is necessarily opposed to this idea. We just recommend it, sort of neutral on it. The other issue, again, is that, and we can talk a little bit more. There are many ways to design these programs, but in their most basic sense, you end up with a little bit of a benefits cliff, where if you make $1 more than the income threshold, you're paying more for your electricity now, even though you are still could be quite energy burdened. And the benefit of these programs, it's usually a 20 to 30% discount on your electric bill. The average electric bill in Vermont is a little over $100. So we're talking about a $20 to $38 benefit per month, which I don't want to say that's meaningless, but it might not be significant enough to justify creating this entire program for. So, yeah.
I have a question,
Yeah.
just to make sure I'm understanding. So I get how it works on the thermal side. There's there's the 2 cents a gallon charge. It goes to the wax. And then on the electric side, there's the efficiency charge, and that money goes to Efficiency Vermont.
Yes.
And I understand how that works. So for low-income customers who get a discount on their bill through their utility, I know the GMP probably does it differently from others, but who pays for that? Just the other ratepayers?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have a statewide funding source for that. It's GMP just builds it into their business plan or whatever.
It's in their rates.
Okay.
And it's actually a specific line item charge. You'll see a low income assistance program charge on the bill.
And then, sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
And then is it and I think you said this earlier, but I was just trying to, is it a broken feedback loop where everybody pays it, but if you're low income, you have to know about it and apply to get it? Or is it automatically offered to qualifying customers? Because I think one of the problems we have in the legislature is when we try to design programs that have an incomplete feedback loop. We're raising the money for low-income folks over here, but they have to do something, want to do it, care, to get it. So I'm interested, you were talking about direct rebate. I'm interested in things where we're raising the money and it's flowing right back to the people who need it without them having to do anything.
So I believe GMP has kind of a mix in the sense that I think they work with DCF, and DCF does some income verification for other programs. I think there's some kind of transmission like between the two where they're able to, if not automatically enroll people, keep up the income verification for those people.
This is actually ringing a bell because we did talk to GMP about this last year.
Yeah, in 2020, the commission had its own investigation into the creation of a low income rate for all Vermont utilities, and as part of that, there was a study done by GDS for the Department of Public Service, and it evaluated GMP's low income program, and there were best practices that a utility can take to make sure that participation is as high as it can be. And that includes, trying to streamline this enrollment process and income verification. However, that report found that even in some of the best run programs across the country, it's rare to get uptake over the 50% mark. And it's not just, there certainly is instances where people don't know about this program being available to them, but there are also instances of people who are made aware of it and they just don't take it because either they don't feel it's appropriate for them to take the benefit, or they just have reasons for not doing it. And so that is one of the issues that the commission considered when why the commission says we don't necessarily recommend directing all utilities to do this, because under any circumstance you're going to have people who are energy burdened who are going to end up paying more under that program and not getting the benefit.
And to add a little bit to that, to something we discussed earlier, is the wealth issue creeps up when you're looking at an income only variable saying you're going to automatically enroll people, but there might be wealthy people that say, I don't want to be automatically enrolled, or they are enrolled and maybe they are using that program, but they're not really the people that you're intending to target. But they're going to be in that, they might be in the numerator, but they're going to be in the denominator for low income households. So targeting becomes an issue as well. And then I wanted to say one other thing just to kind of level set us. It's tricky with this report, and I think we discussed this a lot, which is that you saw the pie chart earlier. Electricity is only 20% of the average Vermonter's energy bill. And so when we're talking about an electric program for the utilities that the Public Utility Commission regulates, it gets difficult to say you're really targeting energy burden as a whole when it's only 20%.
Right.
And on average, right?
On average, yeah.
There are a lot of people
for
less than that.
Yes, for some people it's less, and in fact, the wealthier people are probably
The highest.
the higher electricity use they have.
Right.
Yeah, Greg Howland.
He said the average average electric bill is $100, but that's bottom line of the electric bill, all charges combined, the meter charges and
I believe so.
or the service charge. So the service charge and energy efficiency charge would be between $18 just basic to have a meter, other bit.
It really varies quite a bit by company.
Well, right
Yeah.
now, I'm a GMP customer, so that's the meter I read, or the bill I read. It's $1.50 a meter. So if somebody has a hot water meter and a electric storage heat meter, you paying $4.50. It was $1. Went back up. It was originally $1.50, went down to $1, went back to $1.50. And people who participate in the program pay 75 cents on the dollar across the board. Service charges and energy charges. But the way I understand, those storm restoration charges, other fines.
Right, the investors, yeah.
Correct. So, okay, and the electric car charging is true. You have to have a smart meter. It's not a separate meter.
My understanding is most would not have a separate meter. It would just be a charger.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
Yeah, and it's computer between the meter and the charger is controlled.
and they would need to opt in as far as things are
Right.
done currently any kind of EV rate.
Yeah. And to further confound things, I mean, my understanding is that I know at least with GMP's charging units, they have like a smart inverter and some of them that can just,
Yeah,
maybe that's not the chargers, that might be the solar. So anyway,
I think Victoria had a
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
I don't know, I want to ask at some point, it could be deferred for later, but the GTS study you mentioned and also maybe during your deliberations, did a performance metric around disconnections ever come up? Because to me, if you're seeing lack of uptake in an offering, it does beg the question, well, how are you rolling out? How are you implementing?
Mhm.
And it does seem like an important enough issue to have some performance metrics developed around it. I wonder, has the PUC ever considered that and or been recommended in another report?
I don't know. Where that would come up, it's in GMP's multi-year regulation plan is where there are usually performance metrics. I don't know if there is one related to disconnection specifically. That's something we can look at. I also know that we have an ongoing case right now about the next iteration of GMPs. So that's something I might be a little limited in talking about,
Right.
because it's an active case.
and the disconnection, I reached out to like the Colorado PUC, for instance. They started a program recently, and we'll cover this in detail when we get to the programs in other states. But when I asked them, has it been successful? Has it reduced disconnections? Because presumably that would be one of the metrics you would use. Reducing energy burden would be one. Reducing disconnection, which of course is like the worst case scenario, would be another one. And they said it's really hard to tell, even though they're trying to figure that out, but that's a goal of theirs. It's still difficult to know how effective these programs are. And so,
How long have they had it?
I think less than 2 years, but I could be mistaken. I'd have to double check.
In Illinois is just starting to look.
I think that's right. Ohio has had one for the longest time in the US, which surprised me. So
So I won't, we've touched on this already a little bit. These are some of the other cases where the commission's been looking at a lot of similar issues. And if some of our recommendations in this report sound familiar, it might be because we've studied some very similar topics over the past few years about how to raise money for weatherization, how to reduce emissions in the heating sector. And a lot of that has led the commission to make this recommendation about increasing the fuel tax. It is worth noting, though, depending on what your goals are, how you implement that could change. If your goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you're going to fund a different suite of projects than if your goal is to reduce energy burden. Because like we said, helping low-income houses with weatherization can often be much more expensive than targeting other houses. So if your goal was, reducing the most amount of emissions, it might be offering rebates to all income earners to install a heat pump or something like that, because a very small incentive could induce a lot of activity. But if you're targeting poverty and low-income customers, it's going to take a different investment in different programs. So while the funding source we've recommended is the same, each of these reports comes at it from a slightly different vantage point because the context and the goals that we were studying were slightly different. So you want me to just run through some of the existing in Vermont? Feel free to cut me out. So we asked all of the utilities, all of the efficiency utilities, and also the government agencies that we work with, to basically fill out a chart for us. Tell us all the programs you're doing. The response was very significant. There are just so many programs that are coming. That are going on, but a lot of them are very similar because they're arising out of the same sort of pots of money. The largest program that we have in Vermont is LIHEAP. That affects the most customers and is the most significant one. The other area where you see a lot is the efficiency program. So VGS has an efficiency utility for its thermal customers. All of the utilities, electric utilities, except for BED, get their efficiency services provided by Efficiency Vermont, and then BED has its own efficiency utility. So you'll see a lot of very similar programs from all of those entities targeting, how do we encourage people to install efficient appliances? How do we, encourage people to weatherize their home? How do we encourage people to, use less energy? And so that there's just a big suite of those programs. But in terms of which programs really touched the most low income customers, it was the Weatherization Assistance Program and LIHEAP were the two big ones. The funding mechanisms for these, a lot of it comes through ratepayers, through our energy efficiency charge on our electric bill or on your gas bill. But also state and federal dollars are added to these. Velco earns money by providing transmission services in the region. Some of that money gets funneled into what's called V-Light, which is used for efficiency. And then we even found there are quite a few organizations that provide heating assistance based on donations. Wood for Good and the Meadow Hill heating assistance. And these are all charitable organizations that are playing a role in keeping people warm in the winter, that it really shouldn't be overlooked.
Tomorrow.
Did you guys look at trends like is on energy burdens? Is it increasing, decreasing? The heating is LIHEAP, the demand going up or down, or did you guys have a kind of fixed point in time?
We were definitely looking at what's being offered right now. However, comments we received from the Department of Public Service did analyze, at least in the electric sector, the number of disconnection notices that were issued and arrearages that the utilities keep track of. And there was some evidence that at least since 2020, that the amount of arrearages, amount people owe or are behind on their electric bills had gone up, or that the in the cases of people who are behind, the amount they're behind has gone up. So there is some indication that energy burden has increased in the recent past.
Just another suggestion for a witness would be the department to hear they wrote really great comments and summarized, just like your report had a great summary of existing programs. They had some scenarios for what collaboration could look like that I think would be great to hear from them directly on, and also from Carol Flint from the department who's with Kathy about those trends, because they've been tracking and noticing because when there's a disconnection, it goes right to them. So
And to speak a little bit more broadly, just from what the research that we did, we saw that countrywide there are increasing amounts of disconnections broadly. Like he seems to be being used more, like things of that nature. So trend wise, it seems like everywhere essentially is facing increasing energy burden.
Right. And we have good data on electric, but again, heating and transportation is harder to quantify, correct?
Transportation especially, that actually made this report quite difficult, in my view, because a lot of the data, if you just looked at reports on energy burden, they're going to talk only about heating and electricity. They don't talk about transportation. And then in terms of heating, in Vermont, we have many different heating types, of course, probably like all the possible ones. A bunch of other states don't. So some states, if everyone's on natural gas, it's way easier to calculate the heat, the thermal, the specific heating thermal component, and then the cooling thermal might be electricity.
You didn't break it down between like if you're burning maple versus ash versus.
Not for this report.
The heating component, does that include wood and pellets in that, or is that just fuels?
I believe it attempted to include all types of heating,
Type of
but how it's reported.
Of purchase of product. So if somebody, there may be a lot of back home neighbor stuff that wouldn't be included in.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify that.
Yeah. I don't know how they would quantify my 25 hours of bucking that I did this year.
No,
Right.
no, well, but you bought the wood from somebody else raw and you made it into
Yeah.
cordwood,
Yeah.
or you made it into firewood.
My hourly rate was really high.
No, I think your hourly rate is pretty low. Cost is what you could be doing. Your opportunity costs are high.
Ralph Bailey?
Yeah, so GMP is charging $2 a month
Right thereabouts. Yeah.
per invoice.
Per meter, $1.50 per meter I believe my last bill was.
Okay.
No, not the meter charge. You're talking about.
The low income.
The low income assistance.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's on top of the meter
And
charge.
on top of the, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know how much money that generates a year? And how much they're spending out on that program?
So we had, I guess let me back up a little bit about GMP's Energy Assistance Program, the EAP in general. It has two main components. One is the one we've already talked about, which is decreasing the bill by a fixed percentage for people that qualify. The other piece is paying for arrearages. That would be arrearage forgiveness. And so the money from that pool, which I do not remember, we had a recent proceeding about changing their EAP somewhat, which is why I know this piece of it. But I don't have top of mind the figures. I would have to go back and check. But that fee that's paying into a fund is then paying for the discount, and it's paying for arrearage forgiveness for qualified customers, with the goal of arrearage management programs, which we could talk a little bit more about later, is to kind of get people back on a level footing where then they can continue to meet their payments. So the arrearages portion of that, how much is spent on that fluctuates based on people signing up, how much those arrearages are. Jake mentioned like the intensivity, the amount of arrearages is increasing, as well as people that have arrearages. So it's kind of on both dimensions, but broadly speaking, like about the country. But so I'll have to look up the specific numbers, but as it stands, the money that is flowing into the program is enough to cover all of the program's costs, which is about the best I can do off the top of my head.
We'll have GMPM obviously to ask them directly.
With any of these programs, there has to be like a rate setting proceeding where you do a forecast of how many customers do we anticipate qualifying? How much is it going to cost to give them the discount? How many arrearages are we going to forgive? And then you estimate a cost, and then you say, well, how much would we have to charge each customer to raise that amount of money? And then that's how, oversimplifying it, but that's what they're doing for that rate setting. And you revisit it periodically, because over time you'll find that your assumptions, drift off from reality, and you need to reset the rate.
Yeah, and in that proceeding, which again, I would have to look at it at the specific numbers, but right now there's a surplus in the fund as of the last time they reported the information, which was earlier this year or last year now. And in that proceeding, they did not change the fee. So to give you an idea, like essentially the program is being able to more than fund itself currently is the situation as far as the last reported information.
So was it within the scope of this study to assess different utilities have different programs, right? So did you guys assess best practices for arrearage programs, or?
I don't know if I would say like assess best practices, but I don't think the commission weighed in on that specifically. But I did look at a report or a kind of a journal article about best practices around the world of different programs, and that included arrearage management. So there's some information in that report.
It's in the report, yeah.
So I talked about some of it there, and then there's a separate report that I have to get it from the shared Vermont library thing, but I could potentially send that around or let you know what the report is to request from the library.
I would love to see.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So currently, just Green Mountain Power and BED have these assistance programs. The rest of the
Yes.
utilities do not. And is the proposal for each utility to stand on its own, or is there going to be some sort of statewide mitigation?
So under current state law, any utility can propose to have one of these programs to the commission, but there's not a requirement that they actually do it. And that the commission's recommendation is to keep the status quo. You know, if the legislature desires to have there to be either a uniform or set of minimum standards, that statute would need to be amended to make that clear. You know, I think some of our utilities are just so small that it really will be a challenge, I think, for them to stand it up on their own, and you should definitely have them in to speak about it. When we sought their input on them, they were not in favor of being required to do this. And it's also worth noting that leaving the two cooperatives aside, they have some of the higher rates in the state. Many of our municipal utilities have some of the lowest rates in the state. And so requiring them to offer a discount, you know, didn't necessarily seem necessary, given that their rates may already be significantly less than other utilities. They're already effectively getting a discount. So it really is that probably one size doesn't fit all. But then if you don't have one big program for everyone, the small ones aren't going to be able to do it on their own, which was an issue that the commission has grappled with since we started these programs back in the early 2000s. The commission has considered whether, you know, there should be a requirement for all of these utilities to offer this program, and we haven't identified a way to make it really make sense yet. It is suggested in the report, you know, if there was a way to bring outside funds into the utility system to do this, that might be something to consider. But if you're using ratepayer funds, the commission had concerns about creating a statewide program for discounted rates.
And I do want to just add that VGS also has a
Yes.
Income assistance program.
Thank you for. Yeah.
I think they just updated the percentage.
I think so. I didn't work on that one. I don't have it top of mind.
So there's also the different utilities have different policies on how they deal with arrearages in general, right? So that would be interesting to assess, like, best practices within that. Even if they don't have an energy assistance program, there's certain ways to deal with it which are more effective than others, right?
And recently GMP in the proceeding I mentioned that was last year to update their EAP, they made it possible for customers to receive 2 instances of arrearage forgiveness rather than one at the time they joined the program, which is how it had previously been, because they were seeing, kind of to your question earlier, that people were still burdened sufficiently enough that they were accruing additional arrearages even with the discounted program. That was approved, so now that is in effect. They have 2 instances of arrearage forgiveness. BED, I believe, does not have 2 instances, just as an example of like how they differ.
Yeah. One interesting piece of context in this discussion that I noticed is that looking at other states, most other states only regulate investor-owned utilities. Cooperatives and municipal utilities are not regulated. And so we didn't find an example of a state that directed its municipal and cooperative utilities to implement a program like this. And I think the rationale behind that general regulatory philosophy is that those are sort of democratically run organizations. The voters and ratepayers of that co-op or town decide what are the policies and in terms of rate forgiveness or rate discounts that they offer. But Vermont's a little different, that we do regulate the small utilities. However, the feedback we received from the small utilities when we asked them this question, should we do this, is they said, well, our voters didn't support this or didn't ask us to do this, so they weren't in favor of it.
And adding a little bit to that, in Vermont, we have municipal utilities that cover more than their municipality in terms of the distribution. That's partly why the PUC regulates them, whereas other states don't. But that's a great point that I forgot to mention earlier about the other states not regulating municipal and co-op utilities. So essentially, another thing that made this report somewhat difficult to kind of get the best information was, if you look at another New England state, for instance, when they say we require all of our utilities to have an EAP, they mean investor-owned utilities, which means by that logic, Vermont actually also has a statewide EAP, because our only investor-owned utility, being GMP on the electric side, and then BGS on the gas side, both of them have EAPs. So it becomes difficult when you go to look for information to see how is it treated at the municipal level. And we did what we could, kind of gathering that information and looking at different programs, but essentially it's a very mixed bag, because like Jake said, it's all down to the municipality in other states. So it gets a bit tricky drawing that line of like, does a state require a statewide EAP? If you hold them to the standard that we're kind of considering here of the municipalities, then none of them do. But if you are holding them to investor owned, then a bunch do, including Vermont.
So I want to go back to the recommendations and the fuel tax, adding onto the fuel tax recommendation, and just some thoughts here that I'm kind of trying to arrange. As we as a state are moving and country towards beneficial electrification, and the markets are starting to move in that direction, and of course we know we have to reduce our fossil fuel usage for climate change reasons. Vermont is pretty unique in I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of a regulatory frame for our electric. We much more heavily regulate our electric sector than our neighbors.
I don't know if I would say that necessarily, but I would say, in terms of what we talked about with the municipalities in that situation, my understanding, like I've not looked at every single state to find and figure out in their statute, but my understanding is Vermont's the only state that their PUC also regulates municipal and co-op utilities.
I think what the representative is getting at is that we are vertically integrated.
That is exactly it.
Which, but we're not the only vertically integrated state. Actually, most of the South still is, and we can, have an interesting conversation about whether they're doing as much as we are, in terms of climate change and things like that. But yes, you're correct. We have a very direct lever on the electric utilities in terms of directing their supply, which through the res Vermont already has, pretty much wrung out most of the carbon dioxide savings you're going to get out of the electric sector through that. The challenge is the unregulated fuel side.
Exactly.
And so, I think if you look going back to the previous studies, the All Fuels Energy Efficiency Report was really looking at that question. How do we wring more savings out of the thermal heating sector, and specifically unregulated fuels. And our recommendation in that report was almost the same, is increase the fuel tax, but where that money was being sent to differed. That was focusing on, that's money that would probably go into the efficiency fund and be used for all income levels. And the screening tool we use in the efficiency program is, cost effective efficiency. When you're talking about trying to reduce energy burden, that is not the most cost-effective way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It might be the most cost-effective way to reduce energy burden, but you're spending more dollar per gallon of fuel avoided because we had to fix the house. We had to, remove the vermiculite. We had to do a lot more work. Whereas in, the all-income area, maybe we're just offering $1,000 rebate and people are buying efficient, heat pumps or something, and that's saving tons of fuel. but we were able to leverage private investment to make that happen. So it really is going to be a balancing of legislative priorities, I think, with these limited dollars we have, and recognizing that there are going to be trade-offs and tough decisions about where do you focus or how do you do everything at once? Is that possible even?
So
Yeah.
I guess it would be my assertion that in terms of ratepayer protections, it's the electric sector where we have the most in Vermont because of this regulatory frame.
Yes, but with the caveat that in our regulatory system, the utilities are able to recover their prudently incurred investments, including the ones that are mandated to meet state requirements. And so I guess I agree with you. We have lots of, but I also want to, that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to keep rates low all the time.
Understood. Understood. And that's not necessarily the assertion I'm making, just that when we're thinking about, we really have no oversight over distributed fuels, rates that people have to pay for heat or transportation.
And that's one thing I wanted to make sure I was understanding the difference between the sectors.
Yeah.
So just to kind of reiterate what Rep. Sebelius said, if you go, and you don't have to go back there, but if you go back to the pie chart, electric rates are the lowest percentage of Vermonters' energy burden. And the place where, even if we can't artificially dampen rates, they have to be submitted when GMP or any electric company wants to raise their rates. They need to justify it. You guys have to review it. It has to be approved. So we have a regulated sector that has, even though I know New England has higher electric rates than other parts of the country, Vermont has, I believe, the lowest electric rates in the region at least.
In recent time, Vermont's vertically integrated structure has, I think, insulated it. I'm speaking very broadly here, insulated it from some of the market swings we've seen more recently. And that hasn't always been the case. If you look back 15 years ago, especially as natural gas sort of started to flood the market, there were significant rate decreases in those, deregulated states because some of that low cost, electricity was able to go right to those companies that are riding the market, whereas we're hedged with long-term contracts. Our costs are very stable. So if there's a decrease in fuel prices, we don't get that benefit right away. It's a much more gradual thing, but we also are protected on the upside. So it's a deliberate policy choice that Vermont's made, one that's served us well, I think, in recent times. But it also, you need to recognize that, ultimately the utilities do get to recover their prudently incurred costs. And so I just want to, again, we have the regulatory ability to look and check and make sure they've done their homework and that they've made smart investments and that they're prudent in managing their businesses correctly. But we can't prevent them from recovering prudently incurred costs. And so there isn't this, again, I just want to make sure that there isn't the impression that we can just keep rates low.
No.
That's the difficulty that we face.
Is it you or me, Madam Chair?
I think I'm done. I was just trying to understand the differences between those important sectors.
Right.
So it is the electric sector that is handled in that regulated way. And then transportation and heating, I don't know where Vermont gas fits in, or I think they're an exception because VT gas is regulated.
Yes.
But for the most part, when you're buying heating fuel or pumping gas for your car, that is an unregulated market.
Right.
Okay.
So with regard to this potential for this recommendation to increase the fuel tax, let me not lose my question. Did the commission look at how that would intersect or interact or influence tier 3 obligations on the utilities? And I know you're looking at that in another proceeding, I believe, tier 3. Or I believe.
Well, so the second bullet here, what part of Act 142 asked us to look at sort of how's the coordination between all these programs we have going on, and our overall conclusion was that in large part they're working well together. There's a lot of collaboration going on, a lot of good work that's being done by all of these various entities. We did identify a few very narrow areas where large customers were able to take advantage of maybe two incentives, because there was an efficiency utility offering an incentive and the local distribution utility offering a very similar incentive.
So they can kind of play against each other.
Yeah.
Bid-wise.
We opened up an investigation to make sure that kind of coordination is tighter, and that we're not spending more money than we need to encourage efficiency projects. Basically, if you have a large industrial customer, we should be giving them enough incentive to make efficiency investments, but not overpaying them or giving them a windfall to do so. But aside from that sort of very discrete topic, that there wasn't a recommendation for additional sort of coordination on the tier 3 side. I've sort of lost track, though. Your question was slightly different about tier 3.
Did we think about what the effect of this would be on tier 3? Did the commission investigate what the effect of this recommendation might be on tier 3 obligation?
I don't think so, but I'm not quite catching the connection.
There's no connection. It's curiosity, and I'm seeing the other investigation. So
obviously,
I'm not understanding the connection on tier 3 either.
Yeah, I'm just sort of trying to do it. It's that if there
every time we are creating a program to reduce fossil fuel usage, thermal usage in homes, and heating, we are potentially setting up competition with the utilities obligation. And so just making sure that we understand the interplay there.
And that is what 25-1094 is looking at, is that, the utilities have tier 3 obligations and the efficiency utilities have greenhouse gas savings goals or efficiency goals that they need to make. And you don't want them going after the same customer. And that's what we're trying to claim credit for the same behavior. So that is one thing we are looking at. I think that's more just of an issue with tier 3 generally, is that at some point, do we have we wrung so much of the emissions out of the system that meeting the tier 3 requirements become more challenging? But there is a alternative compliance price that sort of sets a cap on that. So I don't know if that's really an issue.
My last question is similarly, but looking at the distributed fuels, heating fuels, and I guess transportation fuels. It's the heating fuel sector. So this increase in fuel tax, as you said, it is more regressive than something like a clean heat standard, which of course I support, a more market mechanism for transition. And supporting that whole industry in its transition, which I think Vermont really has to pay very careful and close attention to, as we're seeing greater and greater consolidation within that industry, so that we don't end up with unregulated monopolies, which is where we're heading, and we have in other sectors like telecommunications. Let me get to my question now after my editorial, which is in terms of the community action agencies, do you have a sense to what extent any of the heating fuel or transportation fuel companies participate with those agencies or offer any programs like the utilities do or Efficiency Vermont?
I don't, but I will use this opportunity to plug I was just so impressed when we interviewed the community action agencies, they know their clients so well, and that includes they know the programs that their clients need help accessing so well. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they know the fuel dealer in the town because they make that call saying, hey, we got the LIHEAP funding ready for this person. We need the delivery. And I'm sure that they are plugged into those community charitable organizations that are providing fuel assistance. So I would definitely encourage you to speak with them. I mean, our recommendation is really give those organizations more money and let them do what they think is best with it, because they know this problem, the problem being energy burden. They know what it looks like in the real world in a way that we can't really grasp. And they will know how to use those dollars in the best way. We wouldn't be able to design a program that would be as effective as what they can come up with. So,
yeah, to the extent, Madam Chair, that we continue to pursue this, and I have some interest in this, but I really am interested in the overall transition of that sector. I would love to hear from those agencies about what their experience is with our heating fuel folks in the state in terms of are they participating in ways that is helping their business to transition to where we're going, as opposed to just riding the wave and seeing this consolidation of, just the biggest guy at the end, one fossil fuel dealer, who says, oh, sorry, snowstorm, we're not coming this weekend. So thank you.
Next slide or, yep. Okay.
Just want to make sure, is Vermont Gas paying the low income per gallon fee?
So they have their own income or energy assistance program, which they have as a separate charge on their bill to provide a discount to low income customers. They also pay the fuel tax. So
Like
I think,
fuel oil,
like fuel oil.
propane.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a percentage. Though.
Yeah, it's measured differently because they deliver it through a pipe instead of by the gallon. Yeah.
0.75%.
Yeah.
How much?
Gross receipts. 0.75%. Gross receipts tax on everything, and 0.5% on electricity.
All right.
I don't understand the 0.5% on electricity.
Yeah,
We can.
It's a funding source for weatherization.
Yes.
Is what it is.
Yes. Separate from the EVT charge.
So we only had one last slide, and it was, I don't know if we need to talk about this more. Did we want to go through the sort of various ways you could structure an EAP?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll talk. Yeah. Sure. So first about the first item of LIHEAP implementation in other states. It varies far more than I anticipated when I initially started to look into it. Some states, as I'll get to with the EAPs, actually use LIHEAP funds to fund EAPs. Some states use it for cooling needs. Vermont only uses it for heating needs. So there are some differences in how LIHEAP is implemented on its own. In terms of the EAPs in other states, a bunch of different models. Some of them are done. Some of these that I kind of call out are done by investor-owned utilities. Some a requirement from their commission that regulates utilities. Some are municipal utilities that have their own thing and are not regulated in the same way in the other states. So a rate model would be something that's built into the actual tariffed rate. So it would say, this is the charge for someone with low income, for instance. That's a relatively kind of simple but blunt tool. There are flat discount models that are like what exists at GMP, BGS, and BED Burlington Electric right now. Tiered discount models are just kind of a one step further than that, saying for the people with lowest income, they get this flat percentage discount. For people in maybe a different income category to try to avoid the cliff, the benefits cliff Jake mentioned, have kind of a different amount of discount. And then there are like everyone else, the kind of like market rate bucket. These are all essentially, with the rate model slightly different, but they're all essentially funded by ratepayers unless there's a specific situation in the state where I mentioned where they use LIHEAP funding in some way to kind of mitigate. Then in terms of prepayment, this was interesting and not used much in the US. I think it's in Arizona, maybe is the one I found that uses it. But it's used a lot around the world, apparently, where people are actually paying like you would for gasoline, essentially, but for electricity. Like you go out to your meter and you like tap a card that you're putting a certain amount of money into it. I don't really see that necessarily as an energy assistance program, but the
I don't even get that. So you can load funds into your meter.
Yeah.
So if I can afford $100 on my meter this month, that's what I load. And next month, maybe I can only afford 80 and that's what I load.
Well, so you still have to pay for all your usage, which is why it's a little odd to me that it is considered an EAP by kind of the broad understanding, but it's more like better awareness of energy usage. That's really what I consider it to be in that bucket. And I was fascinated. Apparently, like in Ireland, it's very common. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, pay as you go it makes people self-limit their consumption. And
right, because you can probably see, like, oh, I'm getting close to what I budgeted.
Right.
Exactly. So I won't run the dryer right now, that sort of thing.
Right.
Can I go back to the tiered discount model for
Yeah,
a second?
please.
Like, how do they determine income? Like, if the low income, if you're enrolled in certain programs, then that's an easier way to determine whether you're eligible. But the middle section is a little harder.
So some states use, like you said, the kind of automatic enrollment by way of income verification somewhere else. So say with DCF or SNAP or WIC or something like that. And they, in some cases, they're well integrated. In some cases, they're not. It's like probably they'd have to pick up the phone or something like that. In other cases, it's self-reported. That surprised me, but that is out there. I think California is the state that had, at least that comes to my mind, the tiered discount program that was most easy to determine from the outside exactly what's going on. They have something I think called CARES. I might get the two names confused, but CARES, which is for the lowest income people that get a certain discount. And then I think like FAIR or something of that type that is for people just over that. But I think maybe essentially like a few $1,000s more kind of idea in terms of the area median income being covered. California, my understanding, which I would have to look back to verify, but they use kind of all the tools at their disposal. So if they have income verification somewhere, they try to link it up. You apply through your utility directly, which is another kind of interesting part of this, is that a state entity might be doing income verification, but then it's up to the individual utility to actually implement the discount for a customer. So in one way, that's costs being shifted to the state for the income verification. In another way, that might be a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's kind of how it's done. I have to dig back in to really like look at specific utilities or specific states and how they do it, but it's ranges essentially from self verification to you show them your income tax return kind of idea.
Yeah. So how long is it?
But the utility remains whole with the tiered income. So that's cost shifting is basically what the tiered.
In some form or another, the utility remains whole, whether it's by charging other customers enough to make up for it, or it's using other funding sources to complement.
But never reducing their rate of return.
Essentially, that is my understanding broadly, and I haven't looked at that question specifically, but that they're just two unrelated, basically, phenomenon.
Because the utility, like Green Mountain Power, they're making money off of capital investments. It's a CapEx
Right,
program. It's not an operational
Right, they recover their prudent investments with an allowed rate of return.
Right, so, yeah, just separate from the rates and volume
But
of
the rates,
electricity.
but the rates support that.
There's a very sort of complicated process for dealing with the volume of sales to ensure that the revenue requirement is met. But basically, the utility, ideally, the utility is indifferent to the volume of sales that it has.
Right.
So
And
Yeah.
maybe to your point, it doesn't have to necessarily be that way. Rate of return can be regulated in all sorts of different ways. But typically it's done with the CapEx and conveying a different volume.
My question's about what New Hampshire has.
Okay.
I was
You want me
wondering
to
the
pull
price
up
that
the
New Hampshire
chart?
has. Yes. Apparently they have,
Sorry, what was that?
New Hampshire has some kind of tiered discount.
I believe so. Do I have
Or
it in the report?
New
I
Hampshire
might have
has a
that somewhere.
statewide, it's statewide.
So again, when they say statewide, it's only investor owned.
Oh, it is. Okay. New Hampshire's
So-
an example of statewide meaning only IOU.
Essentially everywhere but Vermont is an example of when they say statewide, they do not mean municipal. Like, for instance, Sacramento has a very well-known in the utility world, municipal
Slide.
utility. Yes. They are not regulated by the California PUC. I think they're not called PUC, but whatever they're called. They're not regulated by it. But the Sacramento municipality does have like its own programs as well.
Statewide,
So this is something that came up multiple times when we had people commenting, is there's a view that Vermont doesn't have a statewide program, a lot of these other states do, but that's not really quite the truth because of the nature of Vermont's regulation. So it made it a little easy to talk around each other and like talk in circles with that. So I talked about prepayment a little bit, budget billing. So budget
I
billing.
think Rep. Sebelian's
Oh,
question
yeah,
before
sorry.
we move on. Sorry.
And it's actually just a comment, actually, and for you, Madam Chair, and I don't recall that we have done anything around rate making.
Oh,
And it's not something that I have
I would love
had testimony on during my tenure here. So, I mean,
off season.
it could be, I know it's incredibly complex, but that would be something I'd be very interested in, maybe helpful.
And understanding like what return on equity is and revenue requirement, like that would be really good for us to understand.
So, TBD on the parking lot on that one. We've got a lot to try to do before crossover. So remind me, but, we could spend weeks on any one of these topics and, I already feel like crossovers tomorrow. So, who was next? Yeah.
No, I'm set.
Okay.
I'm waiting for crossover.
Well, it's tomorrow.
So
So,
with budget billing, which Vermont, we actually do require budget billing. This is where it takes many forms because it relies on an average, a mean of people's bills. So you can construct a mean in a whole lot of different ways. It can be a rolling 12 months. It can be the last 12 months, etc. But anyway, the idea is that you take a 12-month period of usage in a building. So this could theoretically involve a previous tenant, but you take the usage of a building and say, okay, it looks like you're going to use this amount of volume over the course of the year. So we're going to apply our rates to that amount. That's going to give us a dollar figure. Then we're going to spread that dollar figure out divided by 12 and say each month you're paying 1/12 of your total yearly expenditure in order to smooth what otherwise is a quite seasonally spiky usage, where with the shoulder seasons being much lower usage and then summer increasingly, if you have AC being usage, and then of course the winter being the largest one.
but you don't, my experience with that budget billing program has been that you don't necessarily then get to roll that into the next year. Do you guys require that? For me, there's then often a pretty brutal, and you have 12,
Oh,
$1,200 extra due by June 30th.
if you're.
Before
if
we
your usage
restart your
ex-
next budget year.
if-
Yes, and that is the case with most of them,
Okay.
is that it's,
So it's helpful for most of the year until the final account.
Well, it's helpful if your estimated annual usage proves to be accurate. If
Right.
if you exceed what the estimate was, then yeah, you're delaying, you're basically getting a balloon payment at the end that's not.
Right, if it's a
pleasant.
cold winter.
it's possible to come in below as well.
Right,
Mhm.
and you would get a
And you
refund.
get paid back,
Yeah.
but you're paid back at the end as well. So it kind of has a,
Time value of money issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a,
yeah.
but the reason for that kind of potential payment at the end going either way is just to make someone whole before, like you said, starting like the next kind of
Right,
period. Some utilities use like every 3 months, they'll send you a
Settling.
settling bill. Some show you your actual usage compared to your estimated usage based on the budget billing, so you can track like, was I over, was I under, that sort of thing. So multiple ways to do that.
Sorry,
that is
so
some-
you
go ahead.
require that of electric utilities, but it's not required of. Electric utilities are required to offer that.
We have a rule that requires, I think all distribution utilities.
So all electric distribution utilities must provide it as an option, and VGS does offer it, but I don't think it's required.
Okay, but not other heating fuel.
No, because we don't regulate.
Because,
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
Though I do anecdotally know that at least some fuel dealers offer that because I've had that program before.
that's what I was actually
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about. So sorry, I
Yeah.
veered into
Oh, I see.
another,
Okay.
I veered into another sector.
I have no
Okay.
idea.
So then I think we get to the most interesting two here at the bottom, which are percentage of income payment programs. And then arrearage management is kind of a part of all of these in order to keep people in the system, keep people a paying customer. But the percentage of income payment plans take a number of forms. And we talked about energy burden. And if you remove transportation, so let's pretend that we're only talking about thermal and then electricity. So this would include like wood or anything used. But so hypothetically, we're saying all electricity usage, all thermal usage. We want that to be some percentage of customers' income. So a lot of states use 6% for the combined total. Some have like varying ways they calculate it, but essentially it's saying it's targeting energy burden directly because it's saying, okay, energy burden is a percentage of your income. So what if we just make you pay a percentage of your income? This is I'm an economist, so this is economically complicated because it only goes one direction. Like people that make a whole lot of income, they're not paying the same percentage. If you would pay less, a lower percentage, that's what you pay. But let's say it's 6%. So some people might pay 4% because they either make a lot of money or have very low usage. Someone that might theoretically use 20% of their income in a given month, which is averaged over the year and kind of calculated in a reasonable way. But they then would only pay 6% of their income's worth of payment, which means that other 14% of their income, that usage is being paid for largely by other ratepayers. So it's a similar mechanism in terms of the transfer of funds, but it is targeting energy burden directly rather than targeting a percentage discount on the bill, which might be largely unrelated to the energy burden itself. This again, this only really works if you take out transportation as part of energy burden, but multiple states have programs of this type. Some of them use LIHEAP funds to fund this in what I think is an interesting mechanism where they say at the beginning of the year, you can either take LIHEAP benefits directly, the like typical fuel assistance type of things that we discussed, or you can take this percentage of income payment plan. I forget which states do that off the top of my head, but
Illinois.
is it Illinois? Okay. So these types of plans, as I said, they're targeting energy burden directly, but they have a very large economic potential impact. And again, it has the issue of opting in and people that you're choosing to use the program. So you don't want to increase the burden of people that need it but might not use it, or need it according to our kind of interpretation of energy burden. Some states would only do this on the electric side. Some do it a combined method where the utilities talk to each other. Like say, even some utilities are natural gas utilities and electric utilities in some states, and they do it as a combined basis. It's kind of, because it's working with averages of income, it's like your last year's income, things like that. It gets a little tricky mechanically, but the general idea is just that you're saying your energy burden will only be 6% because by regulatory power, we made it 6%. And then for people that would pay a lower percentage of their income, but more, are funding the program.
Participants. It's definitely the most targeted of these options for addressing energy burden. It's the most administratively complex also. So yeah.
It also seems like it'd be really important to focus on efficiency for those customers. Right?
And that is part of some of the states, like
do they combine?
Yeah, some sort of joint like effort to do that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I mean, it's an interesting point is that traditionally in Vermont, getting to rates and rate design, you have a choice. The regulator has a choice. Which costs do we put into that fixed customer charge that doesn't vary with how much they use, and into the volumetric charge, the per kilowatt or per therm charge, and that varies with how much they use. And in Vermont, we've tended to put more costs into the volumetric charge to create an incentive for weatherization and for efficiency. But anytime you change the rates, you potentially affect customers' usages and their incentives to conserve.
One question that could come up with these percentage of income payment plans is what about people with no income? They typically have to pay a very small amount, like the fixed charge, per month, and then otherwise do not. That's a small percentage of people that was accounted for by some of the states when I looked at how they do it. So I mentioned Colorado earlier. They recently implemented this type of program, and they're the state that, when I reached out to them, said, we're not sure how it's affected disconnections. It's hard to tell. Like I said, the trend is disconnections are rising. So if you implement a program, you might be reducing the rate of increase of disconnections, and that would be a win. But the counterfactual is not observable because you've changed the program. So it's a bit hard to tell how successful programs of this type are. I think Ohio's had one since like the 80s. They might also use the LIHEAP funding, I forget. And then the last type of arrearage management kind of is a part of all of these other mechanisms. And most utilities that I looked at have some form of arrearage forgiveness. If they're an investor owned, it has to be approved by their regulatory commission. If they're municipal, it's approved by their kind of municipal group in other states. Arrearage management programs take a lot of different forms as well. They can be as simple as everything you owed, it's gone now, it's zeroed out. Or it can be if you want arrearage management, you have to sign up for a budget billing program. And then every month you pay your bill on time. We're going to reduce your arrearage by a 12th or something. So it's like, as you're kind of paying along, you're reducing the arrearage. So lots of different ways to kind of articulate it. But the general idea is to keep ratepayers as ratepayers, and not have to disconnect people for kind of a long running arrearage if possibly they can keep up with their bills going forward, which of course increasing energy costs make that more difficult.
Is there any forgiveness of reconnecting fees? I mean, $35 for a reconnect after hour fee on a 200 kilowatt hour a month arrearage. You're paying $40 for energy, you gotta pay $35 to get reconnected.
Yeah, the arrearage, my understanding of most of the programs is that it's just an all-in arrearage. So it doesn't matter kind of where the charge came from, whether it's a reconnection fee or part of your volumetric usage, but it would be potentially forgiven. And a lot of programs only allow you arrearage forgiveness once. Some it's only at the start of the program. Some are a little more flexible. It just depends on the exact implementation, which of course matters a lot to individual people, but it's kind of hard to say broadly. It didn't strike me that there was some typical way arrearage management was done. It was just varied by utility and by regulatory body.
How often does a utility report on its EAP and like how much arrearages have totaled for them? Uptake by customers?
So the only utility that I can directly comment on is GMP because I was the hearing officer for their last EAP case where they made the change. And I believe we have a yearly compliance filing that's required of them to check it, partly because they had the surplus of funding. And so as a regulator, it's important that that number is as close to zero as you can get, essentially, as long as there's enough to keep funding the usage of the program. So if surpluses are too high, that means people are paying too much into it, and ratepayers are not actually seeing the benefit from paying into it. If it's a deficit, which it has been in the past, then that means people aren't paying enough into it, and so it's not able to fully fund itself. But so to answer your question, the commission can require compliance filings for those EAP programs. For GMP, at least, I can say definitively that we do. I don't know for the other ones, but
I would imagine. I mean, I'm speculating, but I think we do. Like, anytime you have a utility holding what we would refer to as like a regulatory asset, like money on the books that either needs to be paid out or collected, like you're going to be checking in on the fund balance periodically.
Wow.
And yeah, so I think that is the end of our presentation, but here are our emails. Elizabeth Schilling, another staff member of the commission, couldn't be here today, but also participated in the drafting of this report, and we're all available to answer questions if you have them about this report. Thank you for having us, and
yeah, thank you very much.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I think we have one more question.
Oh, of course,
Please.
Receiving findings from FCC.
Oh, okay.
So when you all, you guys are probably not the right people, but we have retirement of copper application, and the requirements, the federal requirement is to notify you, the governor, and the Secretary of War. And thank you for that.
Yes, I'll never get over that.
Yeah, and I believe that the filing that came was, or the notice was in a 130-page document.
Yeah, that's I've heard of this issue. I'm going to refer you to Dan Burke, who's our telecom guy. But yes, we receive these filings. They come in EPUC, and I mean we do review all reports that come in. But when it comes to what exactly the commission does about notices of copper retirement, I would ask you to get in touch with Dan, because I don't know. Yeah.
And so as a mailed notice to you of a hard copy,
Yeah.
because I believe that's
how it came to us, was not through EPUC.
So you all would load that up into EPUC?
I'll have to talk to the clerk and find out exactly. That's in ideal practice. Yes, everything is ending up in EPUC. I don't know if
Unless it's confidential.
Unless it's confidential. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. This is really important kind of stage setting work for our work. So appreciate you getting here, and I think